I'm Keith.
And I'm Emmeline, and you're listening to the Creative Education Podcast.
Today's guests are Diana Laponder and Susan Simpson, both clinical psychologists with an interest in burnout.
Hello, well, thank you very much both for joining us this evening for the Creative Education Podcast. And I wonder if you both might like to introduce yourselves. Oh, but who will go first? Susan.
Yeah, well, this is the question. I'm happy to go first. So, thank you for inviting us. This is very exciting to be with you. And I'm Susan Simpson. I'm a clinical psychologist based in near Edinburgh, and mostly working in the NHS. And also, Diana and I have, I guess, been running workshops on preventing burnout, and so I guess that's another big component of my work.
Yeah, and I'm Diana, and Susan and I were really happy to join you, and it was also a bit exciting how it would go. So I think it's really nice to be able to join you and tell you something you want to know about burnout and the subjects. And I work as a clinical psychologist too, like Susan, and I'm based in the Netherlands, in the middle of the Netherlands, in a town or a city called Utrecht, and I run my private practice over there. And because I was very interested in the subject of burnout and schema therapy, I ran into Susan a couple of years ago, and since then we started to build up, we could call it kind of like a community between the therapists, don't you think, Susan?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, trying to build well-being amongst therapists of all kinds, and really prevent burnout, build resilience, and a sense of well-being in our day-to-day lives, because I think we all have quite stressful, busy lives, and I think that's
especially at the moment.
Yeah, exactly, especially at the moment. Yeah, and I don't think that there's, that's out of our control. There's so much that is out of our control when it comes to stress. So it's really, I think our work is really about how to manage that stress, how to work with stress, not how to get rid of it, which is something we'll talk about, but really how to be well in amongst all the stress.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And I know that your focus has been on speaking about burnout with therapists, but I really think, as you say, it's applicable to everyone. And I wonder, I think we might focus on particularly for people working in the education sector and for teachers. But I wonder if we should start by a generalised kind of understanding of what burnout is, and if you'd be able to tell us a bit about that.
Sure. Shall I start, Diana, with that? Yeah. So I guess it's a state of chronic stress and frustration, really. And there are three main components that have been, I guess, highlighted by Maslach, was the first guy that really defined the concept of burnout. And there have been various definitions put out there since then. But physical and emotional exhaustion, which I think a lot of teachers will relate to, and I think in some ways, as a teacher, you're similar to, there is a lot of overlap with therapists in that we're putting our whole self into the work a lot of the time. We're making ourselves available, where and it's very I guess emotionally taxing a lot of the time. Another component that many people describe with burnout is cynicism, feeling cynical, starting to feel detached. And I certainly know personally when I am starting to feel burnt out, just before the holidays come up and I've really reached the end of my tether, and I start to feel a bit zoned out, detached, like actually things that might normally affect me or make me feel quite upset, or I'll feel more detached about it. So that's another component. And finally, this sense of ineffectiveness, this kind of sense that you're not really making any progress, that you're not accomplishing anything, that you're just kind of, it's Groundhog Day and you're going round and round in circles. That can be another, I guess, component of burnout.
I think all these things that you're talking about are going to be very familiar to anyone who's listening
Yeah.
that is a teacher, because
Yes.
our life as teachers is structured in terms, and we throw everything into that term, and we do this thing where we count down the days that are left and how much we have to cram into those days. And you do get that thing, even physically, where by the end you don't have time to be ill. So by the end, when you finally
Yes.
do get your holiday, you've suddenly got a sore throat and you need to take to bed for the day with your headache. And I'm sure that there are, anyone listening to this who works in education will be very familiar with everything that you've just said.
Yeah, and it's also that we have scientific research that burnout risks are really the worst with people working in healthcare and people working in education. So you're totally right. And why Susan and I have the scope to the therapist is not because we think only therapists can have help. I don't find the word right, but we work with them because we just had to start it somewhere. And we started from the area of schema therapy. And inside the schema therapy, we have questionnaires, and you can find your own markers actually for doing not what you should do for your own well-being. And that's a very good instrument. It's called a schema questionnaire. And we found schemas, or Susan found schemas, and they go along with the risk of burnout, actually. So that's why we start with a therapist. But I think what we provide is really suitable also for teachers, because, they overlap a lot. And especially the self-sacrifice is very an intense thing. Also the deadline stress, that there are always people or pupils waiting for you in the classroom, so
Yes.
you really feel the pressure. And like when you're working at home now, what I see also with my children, when they work at home with the Zoom, the teacher's really busy to get everybody along, it already takes a lot of time now with the online working. Is everybody tuned in, and you have to do it for 25 pupils? It's really a lot.
It's such an unusual job, actually, because the pressure points are so much greater, because you have to please your boss and your colleagues and the exam board, and you have to please all your pupils, and you have to please all of the people attached to those people's parents, guardians, grandparents, family, whoever it may be. And on top of that, you're supposed to be doing your own continued professional development. So there is this huge amount of different pressure points. And I think what you were saying there about being sensitive to what your own symptoms or things that show that you're reaching that point are so important, because it's really easy to be distracted by a new set of pressures and not realize just quite how hard the last lot had been, which haven't gone away. You're just focused on this next lot now instead.
Yes. And that
And I
perhaps
think,
lends its... Oh, sorry, Susan.
sorry, go on. No, that's fine.
No, I think perhaps lends itself to often teachers being perfectionists, and that they want to provide the best possible, teaching resources and everything for their pupils. And I think it's changing now, but there was a sense, I think, for a while of being a workaholic was this wonderful thing. It was a virtue, it's great, I work all the time. But really, yes, it's about realizing that that's not healthy to be doing that, yes, all the time.
Well, it's yes, not only is it not healthy, but it's a risk factor for burnout. Those high standards, and I guess trying to, as Diana was saying, kind of trying to sacrifice yourself, trying to please all these different groups that are put, that Keith mentioned, that, that you've got the exam board, you've got the head teacher, you've got the pupils, you've got the parents, you've got so many different expectations being put on you that it's very easy, and if you also have these kind of internal high standards, to be just kind of striving constantly, and in doing so overriding your own needs, not noticing or not listening to your body when your body's saying, I'm exhausted, I need a rest, just kind of override, and then either getting sick or kind of collapsing in a heap when holidays come because you've not been tuned
Every
in.
time. Every time.
Yeah. Or drinking too much wine in the evening because you have had such a bad day, and then you sleep not that well, and then you have to get up, and then the next day you're really more burnout actually, because your energy levels are really not that good. We call it.
I wanted to ask, is there, because we're talking to two different people from two different places which have different cultures, and we have this British stiff upper lip thing where we're going to get through it and we're all going to be fine, and we're just going to power on to the end of the term. I wanted to ask if actually, is the attitude different where you come from? Is there a cultural change?
You mean in the Netherlands?
In the Netherlands, yeah.
Yeah, we have. I think it's really alike. Yeah, I would think
that's interesting.
Our culture is really individual one, and it's really about making performances too. And what we have in the Netherlands is also a very free power with the youth, and there are very lot of people are busy with the health nowadays and with nature. So it's tend to change, and actually I think if we use it right, the lockdown, we just heard tonight that we will be in lockdown for another 3 weeks. So then we have a 5-week period for now. But I think if we use it right, we can make a transition of a less risk for burnout by taking a stroll. You see more people taking a stroll in the daytime, for example, or you have to cook your own dinner, things like that. Spending more time with your children. So I think, it could go both ways, but we're really alike. I think Susan and I always have a full agenda, and we really, because we're heading the subject, we really try to also put other things in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest predictors that we found in our study of burnout was a kind of disconnecting yourself from your emotions, kind of, that disconnecting yourself from your stress, disconnecting as a way of coping. So it's very easy to do this in an individualistic culture, to do this kind of checkbox self-care as a way of avoiding burnout. And I think, as you say, Diana, there's this, I guess, real emphasis in both cultures on health being something that you should do, but it's a disconnected, can be a disconnected, I guess, concept where you're not really doing what your body needs. You're just doing it because it's another standard that needs to be met. It's
I was going to say, it's a fine line between feeling better and becoming the new obsession, isn't it? And, if you look at in our lockdown over here, if you look at the amount of people who suddenly downloaded Strava and were doing Strava like there was nothing else on earth. It's and they've all dropped back off again because it's unsustainable and it's a new pressure, and as you say, it's not actually helping. And performance driven, as Diana was saying, very much performance and achievement driven, which is kind of a cultural kind of concept that we must strive. And in order to do that, we need to detach from our bodies and to kind of keep soldiering on and striving for those things. But in doing so, we lose our well-being, because even that health-based, I guess, supposedly self-care becomes another task to be fulfilled. It's not in tune with what we really need. We're still pushing ourselves rather than resting. And one thing we noticed, actually, Emmeline, you might remember from the workshop, that when we
actually did, and Diana organised some yoga to be actually part of the workshop that we ran recently. And the responses to this, doing this yoga were fascinating, because people were kind of very anxious about, no, I can't spend my work time doing yoga. I can't actually relax. We can talk about relaxation. We can talk about well-being, but there's no way I'm actually going to do something good for my body here and now in work time. It's brought up all sorts of anxieties and fear of not performing in the right way,
I remember there was a session that we were recording, and we were doing a sort of mindfulness journey, I think it was, that we were recording. And Emmeline, you were having an awful day. It was just a day from hell when I arrived to record that with you. And I remember sort of almost kind of peeling you off the ceiling. You were just not for it at all. And we did like these takes, and instead of actually doing the take, we were just talking because we were trying to put the worlds to rights. And then when we finally actually did it, because we were recording doing it, we had to do it. And we felt so much better. I remember you turning to me afterwards and going, oh, I feel so much better.
Yeah, I really needed that. Yes, I can remember. Yes.
Sometimes we just fight what we need, don't we? We fight against what we need rather than actually tuning into it. What is it that I'm feeling? What is it that I need? We kind of, it's very hard to accept what we need sometimes, because we feel like we should be performing or achieving or,
Yes. And that was perhaps a double-sided coin, where I'd let everything out to a colleague and a friend, and I'd been able to, and then we were just sitting together, just being together, breathing, and yes, that's perhaps.
I mean, all we were doing was breathing, I think. I don't even think it was a particularly complex activity. We were literally sitting and breathing in a way that was slightly guided, and that was enough to physical change in the body.
I think that's really a central point, because Susan and I are working on this, because we think you should really, we call it take your body at work. So we don't want you to only be like, I call it a potato head, like little children draw little puppets, little people. There are always a head, and then you have the sticks and the legs and the arms. And that's how a lot of adults live. They live from their head, but then it's really quite unbalanced. So I think it's really important to make the body more active. So when Susan and I were having a chat before this podcast about what we give you a take-home message, it's really bring your body at work and stay tuned, choose certain minutes during your working day to tune in and feel how you are feeling. And I think what we offer is not really that hard, but it goes along with movement, getting your body in a different action than tuning it out from the head and talk. So we should talk less and move more. I think that's a very healthy way of getting more in balance.
It's a great analogy as well. My wee boy is 5, and my house is full of pictures that are heads and just bodies that are sticks like that. And I'm never going to look at it the same now. Every time I see it, I'm going to go, am I just being my head? Is that all I'm doing? And if you're a teacher sitting in a primary 1 class today, or you're going into your primary 1 class this morning, go and think about that, because all day as you see that little stick man, you need to think about whether you're being that stick man or whether you're actually present and being there.
Yeah, and when the body is just transport for the head, is just the kind of, it's just what carries it around really. And I think the other bit that is kind of counterintuitive, if you're very kind of achievement, productivity focused, is that, and this is, I think, the anxiety that came up for people in our workshop when it came to doing some breathing and doing some yoga, was this sense of, but I have things that I need to achieve. But if, the research suggests that it's the opposite, that actually when we start to feel exhausted, when we start to burn out, and if you reflect on your own lives, and the times that, I know personally, when I'm feeling exhausted, I start to make mistakes. I'm not being productive at all. My creativity's gone completely out the window, and yet I'm soldiering on. I am going to finish this this piece of writing that I'm doing, but I have to go back and rewrite the whole thing again because it's full of mistakes. It's so it's a false economy to push through.
And it's an economy we create in education all the time with league tables. We do it all the time. And we've spoken about this before, and the difference that league table makes to cutting out all those subjects that give you the skills you guys are talking about, because art and music and drama and cooking and woodwork and things that are physical and use your brain, or use your brain creatively, I should say, as opposed to academically, and your body, they're the things that we keep not giving value to in the education system.
Exactly. And in our culture in general.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and I think this morning I had a supervision session for myself, and we were having a chat about the lockdown we have right now. And I think what you have to offer is really to be creative. I think also Susan and I really try to teach people to be creative again, to find their happy childs again, which things you can do to get more energy. And I think working with children is really a good way, because it's really quite easy. You just have to look at the children, and if you follow the children, you can be more creative. And what we have in the lockdown now is actually what I also can call a false economy, because we think that the work we normally do at our jobs in a different building with a different team, now we can just transport it to the kitchen table, together with the children on the kitchen table, with the dog behind, with the kitchen where we have the groceries, and then putting out the same amount of work. It's just ridiculous. So we should really be more creative and not think that working in location A is the same at location B, or in the time A is the same and in the time B, because we're really not productive. It's really burning out.
Yes.
But there's another thing in there as well, isn't there? Is that we're assuming that the amount we produce in place A is an acceptable amount that's being asked of us. That huge amount of work that we're being asked to produce to be productive 24/7 in that space, that's the bit that's not okay. That's the bit that isn't good, because being at home and spending time with your family and being more productive because you are feeling more creative and because you're supported by the people around you, that's surely better quality work in the long run than that mass-produced, must-do-it-now stuff that we did because the person had the thumb on top of us pushing.
And also use different networks. I had my son, he just started secondary school, and he had to make a video about the Superman, and we were chatting about, because he needed my help, he thought, and I thought, let's help him out. And what we did actually was cooking dinner, and then we edited all images, from a video. So then sometimes you just do something in a different way, but you get along to things you have to learn in another way. So if you tend to be creative, then you don't need the whole list, but you can toss it around a bit when it's suiting your energy. I think that's much better.
Yes, and I think that's really important as well, Dan, is that we've spoken previously in the podcast about teachers letting themselves be child-led and not overly, and that will probably, like you're saying, awaken their inner child and their happy child, because things don't need to be overly planned and meticulously planned down to the point, especially not with children, because it's child-led and the teacher is getting something from it, and the children will be getting so much more from this as well, because they're creating something that they have come up with and being creative themselves. Yes.
So we've spoken a little bit about what the symptoms are, what the things are that show that we're in burnout. And you've spoken a little bit about the questionnaire that you guys use. I wonder if it's worth talking a little then about how we recognize it in ourselves. So, how can someone in the classroom, because you're talking about there being specific things for specific people that show that you're headed towards that. So, how do we look for those in ourselves?
Well, I think, as you say, it's very individual, but you might notice kind of chronic fatigue, that you're feeling lacking in energy a lot of the time, you're feeling tired, you just feel like you don't want to go anywhere, that you're lacking in creativity because you just feel like you just want to lie down. You might go to bed early, but you still wake up tired, that kind of thing, and just kind of need extra time. But you might also find things like you're just feeling bad on a Sunday, before you go back to work, that you notice yourself feeling exhausted, or your mood dropping because there's this, your body's protesting. So you might actually love your job and really want to be in at work, in terms of enjoying and feeling like this is the right job for me, but your body's protesting. You're actually finding that you're feeling anxious the day before, or you're feeling anxious at work. You might notice insomnia, that your sleep is affected, and might start off that it's just a few nights a week, and then you might find that you're having trouble getting to sleep, or you're just waking up early in the morning, or just sleep becomes a real problem for different people. It can become quite an ordeal. Impaired concentration and attention, so you might have just trouble thinking about things. You need to reread things over and over again. As I say, you've kind of written a document, but you just feel like, I'm not happy with that because it hasn't come from a place that I feel passionate about or creative about. I've just done it because it's another thing to tick off my list, and it's just really hard to focus. It takes longer to get things done, so you kind of just dragging yourself through activities. You might also notice physical symptoms like chest pains, tight chest, that kind of thing, and palpitations, dizziness, stomach pains, that kind of thing. So different people will have different physical symptoms. IBS, that sort of thing can all become tied in as well if you're vulnerable to that. More commonly get illness, back pain's very common, and other types of pain, very, very common for people who experience burnout. And for some people, of course, they might lose their appetite, and especially in the early stages of burnout. But for most of us, we kind of end up eating more, and just kind of, and again, that's a way, as Diana was talking about, drinking, as a way of trying to numb yourself. Overeating can also be a way of trying to numb yourself. And of course, this is a vicious cycle, because we know that detached coping, trying to avoid and get away from your stress, which is a very human response, really, because nobody likes discomfort, but trying to get away from the stress and detach yourself actually ends up being a risk factor for burnout. So it actually increases, it actually snowballs, if you like, into a more significant, burnout result. And so what one of the things we're really advocating is doing what is kind of counterintuitive. As you say, Keith, there is this kind of stiff upper lip, we've just got to soldier on and man up, and all these different phrases that we've got for kind of overriding.
Being bad to ourselves, yeah.
Yeah. And ultimately, it is about the opposite. It's about practicing being good at stress. It's about actually being with the stress, noticing when what's happening in your body, being in tune with it, and not being scared of stress, but also not running away from it and avoiding it because it is uncomfortable. Because most of us actually have this real fear. Stress is going to kill me. It's going to give me a heart attack. And then we become even more stressed. And actually that type of stress, because there's different types of stress, that type of stress does put you at risk, ironically. Whereas if you can lean into it, if you can be with the stress. And if you can recognize this is just my body preparing me for doing, the work that I love, but it's also my body giving me signals that I need to listen to, then we're much more likely to get a healthy stress response, which is actually potentially protective of your heart and protective of all sorts of, body functions.
So these stresses that you're talking about are these signs of stress that you're talking about. When we start hitting those, are we headed for burnout? Is there no way back, or is there something that we can do when we notice those? Do we have to experience that whole burnout just to get past there, or is there something we can do?
I think one of the things that we talk about is, sorry, Diana, I know I'm taking over a bit here, so tell me to shut up when you want to say something. No, I was just thinking, when it comes to stress, this is part of doing a meaningful job. As a teacher, it's an extremely meaningful job. It's one of, if not the most meaningful job, because you are preparing the whole next generation. You have as much input. You probably see these kids more than their parents do in many cases. So there's this massive input that you have to the world, and to the next generation. So it's a very it's going to be a very stressful job, because that's what comes with a meaningful job, really. That there is this extra aspect to it, but there are a lot of protective factors in there as well. We know that, for example, having that meaning in the job, focusing on the meaning in the job, focusing on why you're doing it. Why am I doing this job? What is my bigger purpose? And how does what I'm doing day to day relate to that bigger purpose? And staying in touch with the meaning of your job, but also, staying in touch with your body, staying in touch with what your body's telling you, and not numbing out. So if your body's telling you, do you know what, it's 10 o'clock in the morning and I'm feeling really exhausted, and I've got a million things on my list I've got to do with the kids today. I mean, what would you say to that, Diana? What can people do in that moment that's not going to take an hour, but it's actually going to replenish them in that moment?
What's really the most easy is just a breathing exercise, and you can easily do it together with the children. So make a small play out of it. That's really quite an easy way of working, or doing a movement exercise in your class. I was sitting. I was seeing my son last week also with his education, and his teacher, they were all busy by signing in the Zoom, and then everybody was there, finally there, and then he made a toilet paper challenge. So they have to throw balls, they have to get toilet paper rolls and just bring them back and throw balls with it. And it's just a very funny exercise. And when they throw it away, they were just there, in a creative mood where you want them to be. And then as a teacher, you can also be in the same mood. So that's what I think that's really quite easy. Especially with children, you can also count, like, okay, guys, I'm checking your breaths, you can just have a stopwatch for a minute and then see how many breathings they make in a minute. They like challenges, and then you can do it yourself too. So it should not be that difficult, I would think. And what I was also thinking about, Susan, is something that's quite central in all of our work, and it's called connection. So it's connection with the work you do, it's connection with your body, but it's also making a safe connection with the people around you. So if you stay focused on the children, then they can also give you signals to put it down or to put more pace in it, to put on a different pace, and also together with your team. you know, to make a safe connection with your team, and not really not it's really not helpful to only chat about what's bad, because it's bad energy. So then you come to the harmful stress, and we don't want the harmful stress because we know our jobs are stressful. So we want together to find a creative way how to cope with the stress we are feeling on today. So that's really, if you're complaining, you're totally lost. I personally think, but I'm really allergic to complaining, because I think we just have this day, you know. We just have the ability to enjoy every day we have. And if you make life as simple as that, it really helps.
So I was going to say, if you're working with your colleagues like that with those connections, and we've spoken about recognizing your own symptoms, but we're all really good at internalizing all that stuff and keeping it to ourselves. So how do you recognize the symptoms in your team and your colleagues, not necessarily your kids, although that too, but the other teachers in your department? What can we do to recognize when they're feeling it and mitigate that too?
Yeah, especially I think what's very important is if you think they're kind of distant or disconnected, or if you ask them for a coffee and they say no, that's also one of the signals. If you are really fed up with social activities, then you're not at a good point, you know. So I think if you feel you're losing connection is really a most easy way.
And you could set up, you know, if this is part of your language, part of your conversations that you have between you, that, you know, where you actually talk to each other about what are your signs of burnout? What are your signs of burnout? You know, how would I know from the outside? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to say at those times? You know, for example, I mean, I think for a lot of us, and, you know, I certainly have this as my dominant kind of coping response, is if I'm really stressed, I start to shut down. I just kind of become overwhelmed and just want to kind of back off everyone, just leave me alone, you know, and then I'll just want to sit and work and override. I don't drink, I don't, you know, so that would be my default response. So
Me too. I'm exactly the same.
Right. Yeah. So it's quite hard to turn that on its head, because that's not, you know, because that's our, I guess, overproductive side or part that is overriding all our needs, our body, and we're disconnecting. And at that moment, as Diana says, you know, we need to connect. Actually, this is one of the most, and Kelly McGonigal, who is an expert on stress, you might want to have a look at her TED Talks, because she's she talks about, I guess, the different components of stress, the different types of stress responses, and one of the most, I guess, one of the most, I guess, under appreciated. She talks about this stress response that makes you social, and oxytocin is actually released as part of the stress response. It's a neurohormone, and it's about, you know, about fine tuning the kind of brain's way of connecting with other people. So it actually is priming us. It's actually giving us the message, oxytocin, to connect with other people, to strengthen our close relationships. And so it's you know, if we listen to that, if we recognize that's what that is, this is what I need. You know, this is about our stress response telling us to connect with other people and get our needs met. So it's about kind of, instead of disconnecting, putting our head down, driving ourselves through, it's about actually finding ways of how can I connect? How can I connect in ways that are going to be replenishing? Like what you were talking about, Emmeline and Keith, when, you know, actually just having that moment of connection where you were able to talk about your day, put the world to rights, do some breathing together, and how nourishing was that, even though you might not have been aware that that's what you needed in that moment.
Yes. And I think as well, it's the doing, as we're speaking about with your colleagues, it was the act as well of doing it with somebody else. I think was really, for me especially, yes, helps.
Perhaps we should talk then about how to include it in your classroom in a way that's also educational, because I think of the word or the term burnout as something I experienced or the concept even, is something I experienced by the time I was an adult. It's a very businessy word almost, you know? We think of it as something that bosses use to describe why their team is not doing this or not doing that. And so is there a way that we can include it in the conversation in our classroom with our kids? And because we talk about mindfulness and we talk about being present and aware and or at least, you know, some of us do in teaching. So is there a way of actually getting them to think about what burnout is and what they can be doing themselves too, because they're dealing with exam stress and hormones and parents and teachers and all sorts too.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mean to have a talk with the students about the risks of burnout?
Yeah, I think just to include it in their vernacular so that it exists as part of their language and that they understand that they're doing mindfulness, not just for the sake of doing mindfulness, but actually because if you don't, there are consequences.
Yeah, I think what you could do, I think burnout is really, we have a lot of scientific research about it, but in the Netherlands, I'm not sure if it's international that way, Susan, but it's not in the diagnostic manual, you know, at that point, because it's like a container. So it has all kinds of signals. And what's really central about it is the amount of exhaustion, emotional, physical, also that you're really fed up, you know. So it's quite difficult to say. That's also why a lot of bosses use it. Yeah, it's burnout, but it can be something very different, you know. It can be very situational that you are not doing well. So personally, I'm also a bit I don't want to put in names that fast, but I think what's quite easy for children is just like having like a mind map about how the brain is working and what we should do for optimization the brain. Because actually, if we want the brain to concentrate on the words they have to write, we also need the brain to play outside, to make it more balanced. So I think that's a very simple thing you could use perhaps with children. It's kind of, I'm busy making yoga videos, and there I read again, we have two sides. We have the positive and the negative, you know. We have the side for activation and the side for rest. And it has to be in balance. That's a quite easy way of talking, that you need activity and that you need rest to stay in balance. So you need to play and you need to sleep. And also you could just really with children make a mind map about, what's the brain doing and what should we do? Because then we do it. We did it in a workshop earlier at Susan, that we made a brain map, and there were all kinds of things in it, you know. I think we had burnout inside, but we tend to change it every time and we have some new ideas. But then you'll have physical exercise in it as well, or having a nice apple as well.
There's an interesting thing that we do in classrooms, or that parents do, and maybe if you're listening as a parent, this can change how you think about this as well. So the thing that we use all the time is, what are you going to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
We don't ask what are the other bits of life going to be. We just ask you what you want to do for your job. So we create that really, really early. And what you're saying about creating that balance and saying to them, we don't play because it's just time off work. We play because it's just as valuable as the things that we were learning or the things that we needed to do. And we don't do PE because you've sat down and you needed to run around. We do PE because it's just as valuable as this, or music because it's just as valuable as this. And I think that's a really good way of talking about it, Dan. I think it's really great that you would do it as a way of balance and say to the children in the class, you know, we're doing this because we also did this, and not because the curriculum says on the ticky box that we need to spend this many hours outside. You know, it's not, you know, because we timetable stuff and we just do it because it's on the timetable, you know?
Yes.
And it's very future orientated, isn't it? It's about, you know, what are you going to be when you grow up? What are you going to be tomorrow? You know, how much money are you going to earn? What kind of job? You know, what's the point in any of that if you have no well-being? if you're losing all those moments of thinking about the future, planning for the future, are lost moments in the present, where you could be alive and living your life and that's I guess a hard thing to actually do in practice, isn't it?
And we also do this thing where if someone answers that they want to be a musician or an artist or a basketball player or something else that people don't think of as a real job, then we sort of laugh. But what we should actually say is, oh, maybe you will be that too. It won't be it might not even be your job. It just might be the thing you'd like to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very much too big subject also for now, because we already talked for a while. But I think also cultural, we need a different way of learning and performing, because years ago, you were just a farmer or a timber, and then in that kind of works, there were already different kinds of activities built in, like pulling out your wood, But nowadays, we really live in a quite digital world, and especially the youth. So what was in the early days was just a way of activity, getting your groceries. Now in the Netherlands, we do it online, they come to your house. So I think we have to change it. In the early days, you really have to learn a job, but now you really have to learn to live in a balanced way, because the job is already there. Because when you're 2, you can use the phone, you see children who are 2 years old using a phone and swiping the phone. So you don't have to learn it, because it's built in society. But what's not built in is to live, and to.
It's interesting because it's so easy to avoid it. You can do it, without even realizing you're doing it. Like I had a really busy last week, and I remember thinking to myself, "Oh gosh, I've had a lot of screen time. I'm just going to go and have some not screen time." And then I sat down with my phone, which for some reason my brain didn't see as a screen. It just saw it as a thing to flick through, because I was not doing screen time, and I was just being so absent. I was not being present at all in what I should have been doing, which was to go and do the things that I would do to relax, which is to do yoga or to listen to records on the record player, which again is more physical than the digital playing of them, or to go and read a book, or to actually do something that would have made a difference. I just sat and did another screen and kidded myself into thinking that I was relaxing somehow. And within 5 minutes, I was doing work on my phone without even realizing I'd done it.
Yeah. And that's the detachment. I think that comes so naturally to us, that we automatically detach. It's not that we're kind of setting out to detach. And part of it is because actually when we stop, when we relax, and this is something that educationally is quite interesting to explore with the students, is when you stop, when you relax, what do you notice? Is there anything that feels, do you feel guilty? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel, what are the feelings going on? What are the sensations going on in your body? Why, and then to look at, if we do end up scrolling through our phones as a way of relaxing, it's because we're not used to being in our bodies. There's an often uncomfortable feelings of stress and anxiety and dysregulation in our bodies that we're trying to avoid. But if we can learn, and if we can help students to, be in their bodies, to actually tune in to that, to actually learn and practice being in their bodies, that it's not supposed to necessarily feel relaxing straight away, but, over time, you will learn to actually feel good in your body and to be able to enjoy being in the moment. Rather than looking for that short-term relief by scrolling through your phone.
I think there's something to be said in there as well for teachers that's worth pointing out, is that what you're both saying is you've got to learn to do it, which is absolutely right. And if I think about, I've done some classes before that have been sort of relaxation classes, for want of a better word, but it's essentially like meditation. And it takes like 6 or 8 weeks, because it's really difficult to lie in the dark and not say anything and not fidget and breathe properly and listen to whatever is washing over you in terms of music or silence or whatever it may be. And so I think if you're going to try any of the things that we've been talking about in your classroom tomorrow, is that if they don't work tomorrow, that's fine. because it's going to take time to learn to do it. And you know, like we were all saying, we've all had to learn to do these things too, and we still slip back into old habits and do things we shouldn't do. But you've got to keep doing it before it's going to make that impact. It isn't going to be an immediate overnight solution, is it?
Yeah, and I think you should choose the smallest one. So just a breathing exercise. What's my favorite exercise for myself is, Susan and I were talking about it because we had a busy day, we both, and the exercise I do every week is laying on the ground and having my legs up in the wall. It's really one of the most easy ways in a yoga posture, and you just get more oxygen in your head. You know, it's just a small energizer. You can do it for 5 minutes. And the first time it's really strange, but if you have like a mat in the classroom or something and you make it funny, you can really do it. You know, it's really not, it's a really way of daring yourself to do it. And then you can make it like a ritual. So it's far, a bridge too far, you know, but it's just so energizing that it will become fun to do.
I think that no matter what the level is that you're at in terms of breathing exercises or in terms of yoga or anything like that, it's just the act of doing it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's right.
I totally understand the feeling that you're talking about. I get that from yoga. I go all like sort of limp and it washes me out completely in a good way, because yoga is one of those things that I really find I can't think about anything else when I'm doing it. I can't do that thing where I go through all the brain stuff that I have to do and the things I need to do afterwards, because it takes concentration to do it. You got to get the balance right, and it's a whole physical and mental sort of connection thing that you guys have been talking about. And that combined with the end where you lie and just do nothing, that you're talking about, where you would have your legs up, or if you do it flat, or and all you do is breathe. That I find that hugely energizing. As you say, you think you would do something physical and feel less energetic, but not at all. It's completely tangible feeling.
And that's nice to say. Perhaps for your teachers, that's something nice to try, because you talked about how can we signal the burnout risks. With some other colleagues, I'm busy on working on an online platform for schema therapy, and we just launched a new version about it. It's called Secure Nest. And you can just sign in and then do a small assignment, and then you have your risks, you know. So where Susan and I have talked about today, you can just find out your risks. So then you have like a small map. What schemes are elevated, you know, for burnout risk. And I'm also now busy with a yoga teacher to make a combination of the different schemes, and we have chosen some yoga exercises especially for that, and some breathing or meditation exercise especially for that. So it's really quite simple, but they will be uploaded later on in the website. And I think for teachers that can be really an easy way of, if you want to learn more, you know, and just don't think I have to perform. But if you want to learn more and you don't want to scroll around the YouTube, then it's really a good platform where you can find good information to try it on. We have also a 10-week self-help sessions, and they were we tried them out with therapists and patients, and they were really enthusiastic about it.
Perfect. We'll put this up in, as well as being on Spotify and YouTube. We'll put it on our website too, so the members there will be able to go and find. We'll put the link in, and they can go and find what you're talking.
Yeah, because it could be easy for a team, you know, if you want to have a connection for a team and you know each other's schemes, like Susan and I, we know our risks, and then it's quite more easy to have a chat on it and to say, hey, maybe you should put legs up today.
Well, it's been fantastic to talk to you and just to learn a little bit more. And I suspect about things that we probably know about ourselves, but we just don't own up to. So I think
Yes, I
it's
think
just good to talk about them, as you say, and talk to each other about them. So it's been fantastic to talk to both of you and learn more about that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us. It's been a lovely opportunity to chat and see you again. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's also, for me, it's really quite nice to see how we can share information in a different way, not that scientific, but actually we're not telling new things. That's kind of funny, but we know from the workshops we gave that they really can give a lot of progress if you just try it, the most easy things. So I hope, you gonna try it out, and also let us know, don't you think, Susan? It's nice to hear back from you, Emmeline or Keith.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's just all what we've been saying. It's being accountable to it, isn't it? Because we all do these things, like that I've been describing, that I've been owning up to. It's like a therapy session. All these things that I've been doing, I shouldn't be doing. But it's I think really valuable sometimes just to draw attention to it and say it, even without the scientific language. Sometimes CPD doesn't need to be about learning all the terms and stuff. It needs to be learning something about yourself that makes you better to talk.
Yeah. And I think as well, Keith, I think we need to drop the should, that actually we're all in habits of doing things that we know aren't necessarily good for us. And maybe we need to give ourselves permission to be well. Maybe we need to give ourselves permission to put being well higher up our list of values than being successful or being productive, or because actually all those other things will follow.
Thank you to Diana and to Susan for joining us, and thank you for listening. And if we've learned anything, it's that you can't help anyone else unless you're in a position where you've already helped yourself. Look after yourselves, and we'll see you next time.